Hello and welcome to Let's Review. Nostalgia is a fairly funny thing. A lot of people will defend something to the death purely because they liked it when they were younger. Now don't get me wrong, I'm as guilty of this as anyone, but I think that's probably where a lot of the appeal of RPG Maker comes from. For those not aware, RPG Maker is a program that allows people with not a lot of experience to create 16-bit JRPGs in the style of, well, old games basically. And I think the nostalgia is where a lot of the appeal comes from. Now, personally, I don't really have any nostalgia for the genre simply because these two are the only ones I ever played. However, I just think that lets me be a bit objective about whether or not they still hold up as games in their own right. So as a result, let's talk about Skyborn, and we start as always with the gameplay. As I mentioned before, Skyborn is designed like an old school JRPG, and as a result, you're going to be doing a lot of walking. This is the world view of Skyborn. You maneuver using the arrow keys, and you can go back and forth between various areas like that one. There's usually someone hanging around. Sometimes it'll be monsters you need to battle, other times it'll just be random guards standing around doing their jobs. And occasionally they've usually got, a line or two of dialogue. Nothing particularly interesting, but it is certainly there. Occasionally you'll encounter quest givers like this young woman. And there's also various shops, which I'll be mentioning later. As you can see, it's deliberately designed to emulate a certain style, and the controls work pretty well, although occasionally, if you're trying to hit a specific one square area, it can be a little annoying because you'll quite often overshoot. It's also worth noting that occasionally the people who wander around will get in your way. This doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's quite annoying. But overall, the worlds are reasonably open. There's usually lots of little things to find. Specifically, you can find things called exploration nodes, which will give you a little bit of bonus experience every time you find one. It's just a little incentive for you to go off the beaten path a little. It's not completely necessary, but it is occasionally quite useful. And fundamentally, that's it for the overarching world of Skyborn. The systems for exploring the world are fine. There's nothing new, but that's actually kind of the point. And overall, they work reasonably well. The levels are pretty well designed, although I suspect some people will complain that they're a bit too linear. But personally, that doesn't bother me. Then, of course, there is the next major system, the combat. This is the combat system of Skyborn. Now, as you can see, we have 5 main party members. This is a fairly late game save, I will say that. And I'm currently fighting in the arena, which is a good way to get experience and loot. So, our fastest character will go first, which in this case is Corwin, who is our primary healer. So I'm going to go into his spell options. Now, as you can see, he has a lot of potentially useful abilities, such as Lazarus, which revives an ally, or Haste, which, as you can see, grants haste. I'm going to grant all my allies regeneration to improve their healing rate significantly. Particularly as these guys, as you can see, like to hit everyone. Now, as you can see, they hit with some very powerful attacks there, which means that Sullivan, who is my primary tank, was one of the few to survive. So I am going to use his Shockwave skill, which threatens the enemy significantly while also slowing them down. The other character to survive was Alda, who is one of your most powerful units because she is very over-leveled when you encounter her. I expect her specifically to do massive single-target damage. So I am going to target that one, as it was the most dangerous. Now, as you can see, that only did a moderate amount. So I'm now going to use his most powerful ability, which I suspect will not be enough, because, as you can see, it has a long charge time, which probably means that he will get knocked out this round. So instead, I am going to use Cripple to attack the enemy and slow them, which gives us just that little bit more time to operate. So he is going to use Taunt to improve his threat. the person with the highest threat is always the one who gets targeted. Now I'm going to use Lazarus on Clarette, get her back into the fight. And then Alda is once again going to use a basic attack because that is her use. As you can see, Alda is now the only one up, and we would beat it. As I said, the arena is deliberately very difficult, but that does give you a pretty decent overview of how the combat system of this game works. The combat, likewise, is fine. There's nothing really spectacular going on, but it has its own quirks and its own balances, and your strategies will be important, particularly later in the game. The only real problem with it is that there are a few abilities and characters who feel a little overpowered, but that's primarily a balancing issue that could be sorted out pretty easily with the odd patch or two. The game also has a pretty decent inventory and crafting system. The crafting system for this game is based around forges like this one. So if I interact with it, I can construct something. So I think I will make us some armour. And I think I will make some medium armour. I can then choose whether to make head, chest or arm armour. So I think I will make some chest armour. From then you can create either tier 1 through 4, depending on what crafting materials you have. I don't have any obsidian. In fact, I never found any throughout the game, so I suspect it's quite rare. But I do have some that, which allows me to create some medium armour out of that. From there, I can equip that on one of my characters. So, for example, I could give it to Clarette, and it would be better than what she's currently using. In addition, there is also a system that allows you to augment things. So if I go to the body, and I can then augment this. Now I have a ruby cluster, which will add plus 20 strength, a sapphire crystal, which will add plus 25 intelligence, or I can improve it with these. So I think I will put in a plus 4 metal ingot, which grants an extra 200 HP, but increases the weight slightly. If you go over a character's maximum carry weight, that will severely impact their speed in battle. It won't prevent them from fighting or anything, but it will make them slower and thus less useful. And fundamentally, that is it for the inventory and crafting system. It's nothing terribly complicated, but it does what it needs to do. These systems work. There's nothing really exceptional about any of them, but they all tie together nicely and they do a good job of supporting the narrative. The gameplay doesn't really sell this game on its own, but it is a pretty solid element of the game experience. The story of Skyborn follows Clarette, a young mechanic who runs an airship repair shop with her older brother Jake. The game begins with her just doing her job, fixing up an airship, but it doesn't take long for you to realise that this world is not particularly pleasant. It's ruled over by a winged race known as the Skyborn, who treat humans like, well, like insects to be stepped on, quite frankly. Out of curiosity, does this game show you that, or merely tell you that? Oh, it shows you. I mean, within 5 minutes of the game's opening, you come across a group of Skyborn guards being dicks to someone just because they can. The game actually does a really good job of making the humans feel downtrodden. But honestly, they're treated with respect and privilege compared to human Skyborn half-breeds. Wait, if the humans are looked down on so much, why exactly would the Skyborn choose to breed with them? No, I mean, if you keep in mind that while a lot of the Skyborn are complete and utter dicks, that doesn't mean that some of them aren't decent people who happen to care for humans, even on an individual level. Then, of course, there's also the much more sinister implications. You've got to keep in mind that just because a group considers themselves superior doesn't mean they won't take advantage. Well, that is a grim interpretation. It is, and to be fair, that is purely my interpretation. The game never gives you any hints about how the half-breeds came to be, and frankly, I'm actually kind of grateful for that. The game also does manage to do a pretty excellent job of building the world without needing to throw in lots of heavy-handed exposition.
Characters give you information in ways that feel natural, through simple things like just bitching about the situation the way that normal people do. It feels natural, and the characters are actually really well written. Even if, he could probably take a few of them apart.
A little cliched, are they?
Well, there is the noble warrior with the heart of gold, and the disillusioned Skyborn warrior, and the sensitive healer. Okay, yes, there are a bunch of cliches, but they are at least quite well written. And to be honest, that kind of extends the plot as well. You'll be able to see a lot of the plot points coming an absolute mile away, but the journey to get there is enjoyable enough.
Ooh, we haven't done this in a while. Let me think. Well, we have a tyrannical group of overlords, so obviously there must be some sort of resistance movement against them.
Yes.
Which the main characters end up joining reluctantly.
Yes.
And they find they have a previously unknown personal connection to this resistance. A missing family member.
Both parents, yeah.
And there will be some contrived romance between the leads?
Yeah. No, actually.
Really? Huh. Well, colour me pleasantly surprised.
I know, right? It surprised me too. The story is pretty well written. It's not exactly a masterpiece, but it's enjoyable while it's there, and frankly, I'm okay with that. It's a fun enough time. It's just not going to be something you always go back to as a truly great example of the genre. Graphically speaking, this game looks pretty much how it's supposed to, because it's supposed to look like an old school JRPG, and it does. As a result, it's not exactly demanding from a technical aspect. However, you may notice some frame rate drops just after you come out of a battle. It's not a massive issue and it only lasts for a couple of seconds, but it might be a little annoying. It's also worth noting that this game's maximum resolution is 640 by 480, which is, again, it's not going to be a massive system hog, and it's not really a problem given the style, but it can lead to a few technical issues, so you may want to be wary about that. The art for this game is quite well drawn. There's some really nice monster designs, and all of the characters look pretty good. I'll be honest, I think it would have been better if we could have also had character portraits for a lot of the supporting cast as well, but I can live with what we've got, and it's not exactly a major problem. As for the actual in-game avatars, they're also pretty good, and they have a lot of visual personality about them. So overall, I'm pretty happy to say that the art for this game is pretty decent overall. The audio falls into the category of simply okay. Both the sound effects and the music are decent, but nothing incredible. They're pretty forgettable once you've actually finished the game, but they're enjoyable enough while they're there. Overall, they're just fine, and to be honest, that's perfectly okay. Sometimes functional is all you need from an element. So, did I enjoy Skyborn? Yes, I did. Should you buy it? If you've got a hankering to play an old school RPG, you could definitely do a lot worse. It's reasonably well written, it's reasonably enjoyable, but I think it might be a little overpriced at 12 quid. I'm fairly happy to recommend it, but you should probably think about waiting for a sale. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got an idea that I need to run past Martin. I'll see you later. Martin, I've been thinking about Shah. What if we called in some help? I mean, you yourself said that there's 42 other Soul Steel weapons bouncing around the world somewhere, so why don't we call in one of their wielders for help? I mean, there's no reason why I have to do this thing alone, right?
None at all, except that I don't know of any others that are still being used.
How do you lose track of that many magic weapons?
Because they are in the hands of people. Ascalon was last seen decades ago, being taken up into the Himalayas by someone who'd heard rumours of dragons living there. Excalibur was thrown into a lake by a bunch of morons who didn't realise what they had. Truthseer
is in a museum in Finland behind display glass and heavy security. For all I know, Animacantor may well be the only soul steel weapon still in play. So what? I have some duty to stand up to this thing? Of course not. What you have is a choice. What? You are under no obligation to fight Shah. You haven't sworn an oath or taken a vow. There is nothing to prevent you from staying out of his way, staying home, staying safe. You mean I don't have to? Of course not. Something like this, it has to be your choice, or it's meaningless. But I don't want to fight him. I don't want to die. And you think I do? I told you, I am still a part of you and we are still connected. You got your hair cut earlier this week. Didn't you notice that mine also got shorter? If you cut yourself while cooking, I bleed too. And if you die, then so do I. Then why the hell do you want me to fight him? I don't. I've been the one arguing against it from the beginning, but it has to be your choice. And I promise that I will be there to support you, whatever you decide.